Hey everyone, it's Anthony from Pretty Printer here. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to use the QuerySelectField in your app that has Flask-WTF and Flask-sqlalchemy enabled. So what QuerySelectField does is it allows you to pass a query to a select field, and the select field will be generated off the results of your query. So of course, like everything, this will make more sense once I show you, but that's the basic idea. It's basically, instead of defining the choices for a select, you will provide a query and that will automatically generate the choices for that select. So before I get into writing the code, I just want to mention that I have the Flask extensions course up on my site now. So if you're interested in learning more about Flask-WTF and all the things that you can do with it, check out that course because it will have not only information on the QuerySelectField that I'm recording in this video today, but I also have a bunch of other things on Flask-WTF. So check that out when you have a chance. It's at prettyprinter.com. So what I'll do first is I need to install WT-Forms Sqlalchemy. So pip install WT-Forms-Sqlalchemy. So it's a separate library. And I already have it installed, so it tells me that the requirement is already satisfied. And then once I have that, I can go ahead and start creating the model that I'm going to use. So first I'll import Sqlalchemy. So from Flask-sqlalchemy, import Sqlalchemy. And then what I'll do here is I will instantiate the database. So I already have the URL for the database there. So I'll just pass in the app to Sqlalchemy. And then I will create a class. Let's call this class choice. So it's going to be db.model. It's going to have an ID column. So db column, db integer. And then it's going to be the primary key. And then I'll also have a couple of things in here. So I'll say name. So this will be the name of the choice. It's going to be a string, and let's just say 50 characters. And then I'll also have another attribute in here. So instead of just an ID and a name, I'll also add, let's say, extra for some additional information. So db string, and it's also going to be 50 characters. So now that I have that, I can go ahead and actually create the form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import from Flask-WTF and import Flask form. And then I also need to import the QuerySelectField from WT-Forms Sqlalchemy. So from WT-Forms_Sqlalchemy.fields, I'm going to import QuerySelectField. All right, so now that I have the QuerySelectField, I can go ahead and actually create the form. So it's going to be a really simple form. I'm going to call this the choice form. And of course, it's only going to have one option, a select field, because that's what I'm demonstrating in this example. But of course, a real form will have more inputs. So not db.model, but Flask form is what I'm inheriting from. And I'll call this, let's say, options. So OPTS, short for options. So I use the QuerySelectField, and there are a few things that I want to pass. So one is the query factory. So I'll leave that blank for now. 2 is allow blank. So as you can imagine, allow blank either displays a blank choice in the select field or it doesn't. So I'll start this off as true, and then I'll show you what false looks like later. And then get label, and I'll explain what this means in a moment, but I'll leave that off for now. So I have these options here, and I need to specify a query factory. So I can specify the query in two ways. I can use a query factory, or I can use just referencing the query directly. But instead, I'm going to use the query factory. So the query factory takes a function that returns a query. So I'll say choice query is the function I'm going to create, and I'm simply going to return choice.query. And if I wanted to add some additional filters to this, I can do filter, let's say name equals something, or something along those lines. But instead, I'm just going to add query. You don't want to add all. You don't want to return the results. You just want to pass the query. So you leave off the all or one or whatever you use. So just choice.query. And I'll create a route. and it's going to be an index. And for now, it's going to return the index.html. All right, so before I can actually see what this looks like, I have to create the table in the database and then add data into the database. So from app import db, and this will be choice query. So I had a syntax error in there. So import db and then create all. And then what I want to do is from app import choice, and I'll create 3 choices. So the first choice will be name will be choice 1, and the extra information will be additional info about 1. And let me just add the actual keys. So name and then extra equals that. And then 2 will be very similar, except instead of 1, it will be 2. And I'll do the same thing for 3. So 2. And then 3 is going to be pretty much the same thing. Okay, so now I'll add these 3 to the database. So db session add 1, 2, and 3. So db session commit, and then they should all be in the database. So let me take a look at my database here. Test.db, select star from choice, and I see the 3 choices that I added in there. So now what I'll do is I'll add the form to my index, and I already have it here to save time. So I have the errors, and I'll maybe just straighten that out. So basically what I'm doing is I'm adding the cross-site request forgery token, which is required so the form can be submitted properly. Then I have some errors down here underneath the actual form, and in this case I think it's ops instead of options. So I'll just use that. So my template is done. And now what I need to do is I need to actually display the form. So I'll instantiate the form here in the index. So QuerySelectField. And then I'll pass that to the template. And then now that I have that, I can actually run it, and hopefully there are no errors. And I will go to the index, and I have no attribute ops, so I'm just missing ops somewhere, maybe in the form. Let's see. Oh, I instantiated the wrong thing. I instantiated the query select field instead of the choice form. So let me just change that and try this again. Okay, so now I have this drop down, and there's nothing. Oh, there we go. It didn't render, but I see 3 options in the drop down. These options, let me just make this a little bigger. These options aren't very useful. Like, it's just the choice object in a memory address. So there are a couple ways I can change that. I can either add a representation down here. So a method representation. So REPR, pass in self. And I can return something like choice and then format self.name. So now when I do it, I get this. So let me just correct that little error there. If I take a look now, it's a little slow to load on my computer, and that's because there's an error somewhere. Yeah, so I need to start the app I saved when I had that syntax error. So I'll refresh, and I'll take a look at the choices here. So now I see choice, choice 1, choice 2, choice 3, and I can put those choices into the query. It's not rendering well because of all the white, but you can see the choices there. So now when I want to actually submit this form, then I do it in the regular way. I'll say if form validate on submit. And then what I want to do is I simply want to return whatever I pass in. So format, form, ops, data. And we'll see what this looks like once I submit the form. So this needs to have both get and post requests. So methods will be get and post. So now when I refresh and select something, let's say choice 3, and hit submit, I don't see anything. So let's see if there's an error there. Validate on submit. I'm returning the data, and let's take a look at the HTML. So I have the header there. I just can't see it. My browser isn't rendering properly, and it just updated, so I don't know if there are any errors with it. But let me see. So I have H1. So perhaps it needs HTML tags. Let's see if that's the error. Like right before I started recording this video, I had to update my browser. So I don't know what that is. But you can see here that I'm getting the value, and I see the problem there. It's because it's treating this as HTML. So I'll change that bracket to be that type of bracket instead. And when I view it and select choice 3, now I see choice 3. So it's just returning whatever the representation that I have inside of the select box. So to change that representation, instead of using this representation here, I can use the get label parameter, and I'll pass in one of the attributes here. So if I pass in ID, I should get ID instead of the choices that I had. So let me make this bigger. And I see 1, 2, 3. And if I use extra instead of ID, I will get the additional information that I put in the extra column. So in this case, the best use would be name. So I'll put the name there, and then I will see choice 1, choice 2, choice 3. I'll submit, and then I see the representation again, which is fine. So that's how you use the choices or the select to generate the choices for the select field using this query select field. If I wanted to specify a different way of generating the query, I can do form.options.query equals something, but I like the query factory a little better because you're defining it outside of the view. So you should know what choices are going to go in the view beforehand, but if you don't for whatever reason, then you can add a query here, and I'll just show you the query. So choice, query, filter, and let's say choice.id is greater than 1. So if I add that there and then run this again, I only see choice 2 and choice 3 instead of choice 1 because I have that filter for choice greater than 1. And since this query is added after the query factory, it overrides it. And if I change allow blank to be false and I refresh this, then there is no blank option. So that's what that allow blank does. So if you don't want to use the query factory, you can use the query down here and then allow blank. That allows you to have either the first option be blank or not exist, and you just start with the first actual option. And then the get label will put the actual value in the select form depending on which attribute from the database you select. So it's actually pretty straightforward, and it's something that's pretty useful because oftentimes when you're creating a form, you'll need to generate a select field from the database. So if you're using SelectFields, then this is a really easy way to do it. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask me down in the comments below and I'll answer any and all questions. Like I said, if you're interested in learning more about Flask-WTF in a more in-depth way, then go to my Flask extensions course on prettyprinter.com. You can also check out the other courses I have there. You can check out the Flask-Sqlalchemy Basics course, where you can learn more about Sqlalchemy, and that course is free. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching this video, and I will talk to you next time.